Damn sure they are going to ask a question on spring security. What is spring security and how to work with spring security? Spring framework provided one module called security module. By using this we can secure our spring based applications. Spring security is one module available in Spring Framework. Available in Spring Framework. Using this Spring Security, we can secure our applications. Using Spring Security, we can secure our applications. When we are talking about security, first we need to understand what is authentication and what is authorization. When we are talking about security, first we need to talk about authentication and authorization. If you are implementing security for your applications, if you are planning to secure your applications, first you need to understand what is authentication and what is authorization. Authentication is the process of verifying whether this user can access our application or not. Authentication is the process of verifying whether this user can access our application or not. It is something like login check. Example, login check. If user want to access our application, first user should log in into our application. Okay. Now, the process of verifying whether this user can access our application or not is called as authentication. Okay. Now, authorization is the process of checking whether this user authorized to access this functionality or not. Authorization is the process of checking or checking whether this user can access the requested functionality or not. Access requested functionality or not. Example, update a record, delete a record. Can user delete the record? Can user access this record? Verifying whether user can access our application or not. Whether user can access our application or not, that is called as authentication. Authorization is the process of checking whether this user can access the requested functionality or not. User is trying to delete one record. Really, does he is having the permission to delete that record? Really, does that user having the permission to delete that record or not? We are going to verify by using authorization. When we are implementing security, if you want to secure your application, then first you need to check whether user is authentication logic is available or not, authorization logic is available or not. Authentication is the process of verifying whether user can access our functionality, our project or not. Authorization means user can access this requested functionality or not. Updating a record and deleting a record. Guys, you got the clarity? What is the difference between authentication and authorization? What is the difference between authentication and authorization? Do you have the clarity now? Yeah. Spring Security is one module available in Spring Framework. Using Spring Security, we can secure our applications. When we are talking about security, first we need to talk about authentication and authorization. Authentication is the process of verifying whether user can access our application or not. Authorization is the process of checking whether this user can access the requested functionality or not. Okay. Now, to use Spring Security for our application, to use Spring Security in our application, they provided one dependency, Spring Security dependency provided for us. We can create Spring Boot application. For that Spring Boot application, we can add Spring Security. To use Spring Security, we have Security Starter. To use Spring Security, we have Spring Security Starter. To use Spring Security, we have Spring Security Starter. Okay. Now, let me go to my IDE. Let me create one REST API with the security dependency. And let's see what will happen. I'm going to create a simple REST API. I don't do anything, guys. I will not do anything. I will simply add one dependency for my REST API, and let us see the behavior of our REST API after adding this. Got it? Yeah, my IDE is opening. Yes, guys, it's opened. Let's go here. Create one project. 54 application I'm going to create. File, new, Spring Starter project. Simple, Spring Boot Security app. I'm going to create 54 application. Spring Security app 1. Click on next. I'm selecting web dependency, dev tools, and I'm selecting security dependency also. First time I'm going to add security dependency also for my project. Security. There is a dependency called Spring Security dependency available, guys. There is a dependency called Spring Security dependency available. Can you read this? Highly customizable authentication and access control framework for Spring application. Authentication and access control, that means authorization. So do you know what is authentication and what is authorization? Do you know what is authentication and what is authorization now? Authentication means checking whether that user can access our application or not. Authorization means checking whether that user have control to access that application or not. Whether that user having access to control that application or not, that is called as authorization. Now by using security, Spring Security, can we do both authentication and authorization? Yes, we can do both authentication and authorization. Click on next. Click on finish. I have just added Spring Security dependency, guys. I have not done anything else. I have just added security dependency in my form.xml. Now let me create one simple REST controller. Let me create one simple REST controller. Before going to do that, let me show you project form.xml. What is there in this project? Let me show you what is there in this project. Simple project I have created by adding security starter. First time in our project, in our complete course, first time I have added security starter in this form.xml. That's why Maven is downloading that from central repository. Security starter I have added first time. So Maven is going to download that from Maven central repository. That's why it is taking time. That's why it is taking time. Good. Yeah. Now go to form.xml. Which version of the Spring Boot we are using? 2.6.4. That is the current stable version of the Spring Boot. These things are normal for us. Already we know what is this web starter. We know DevTools. We know test starter also. But here we have Spring Boot starter security, which is a new dependency. Okay? Fine. Now go to our project. Let's add a simple greet controller or welcome controller. That's it. New class, welcome controller. New class, welcome controller. Just I'm adding a REST. In this REST, I'm adding one simple welcome controller. To represent this class as a REST controller, I am using simple @REST controller annotation. I'm simply using @REST controller annotation. I'm going to write one method. That method I will bind to one GET request and I will try to access that. I'm trying to add one REST controller @REST controller. And I'm writing one method in this public string welcome message, simple, return welcome to Spring Security. Welcome to Spring Security. Here I'm specifying @get mapping, that is /welcome. Okay. Good. REST controller, and there is a method welcome. Guys, is there anything new, or we are doing this from last 1 month? Is there anything new, or we are doing this from last 1 month? We are doing this from last 1 month. There is nothing new here. Same routine. Okay. Now go to resources, properties file. Now I'm changing server port number. That's it. Server port is equal to 9090. I'm not doing anything extra. Fine. Let's run our application. Right click, run as boot app. Right click, run as boot app. Right click, run as boot app. Guys, can you see in the console? Is there anything new thing that can you observe in the console? Using generated security password. Can you see one password is generated? Can you see some password is generated? Yes, one password is generated. Now let's try to access this REST API, guys. localhost colon 9090/welcome. Access it. Oh, is it allowing me to access or it is not allowing me to access? My REST API is allowing me to access or my REST API not allowing me to access? My REST API is allowing me to access or my REST API not allowing me to access? Is it allowing me to access, not allowing me to access? Why it is not allowing me? This is the default implementation of Spring Security. Whenever you add security dependency in the form.xml, by default, it will ask to authenticate. By default, it will ask to authenticate to access the REST API. Now tell me, my REST API is secured or my REST API is not secured? My REST API is secured or my REST API is not secured? My REST API is secured. Got my point? Now, so it is asking me to enter the username and password. Now, can you see the password here? Yeah, copy this password. Go here. Username I am giving as user. Password I am giving, which is printed on the console. Sign in. Is it accessible now? Is it accessible now? Now, can I say my request is authenticated successfully? Can I say my request is authenticated successfully? Yes, my request is authenticated successfully. So what I have done? Simple. Create a Spring Boot application. The first step, create Spring Boot application with below dependencies. I'm not doing any magic here, guys. I'm just creating one Spring Boot application. What is that? I'm using Web Starter. I'm using Security Starter. That's it. Spring Security Starter. And I'm using DevTools. This is the only one thing which is new. There is nothing else, guys. Don't get confused. Sir, आप क्या किए इसलिए आपको login page आ रहा है? What you have done? So you developed that login page by using Angular or React. But yeah, I have not done anything. That is coming from the Spring Boot by default. Spring Boot Starter Security is giving me that. Spring Boot Starter Security is giving me that. First one is Web Starter. Second one is Spring Boot Security Starter. And the third one is the DevTools. Who developed that UI page for us? Who developed that UI page? I developed that UI page. Our security, JAR is giving that UI. JAR is giving that UI page for me. Create a REST controller. Create REST controller with the required methods. Configure the embedded server port number if required. Configure embedded server port in application.properties file if required. Configure embedded server port in application.properties file if required. Okay, run the application and observe the console. Run the application and observe console. Auto-generated password will be displayed. Auto-generated password will be displayed. Auto-generated password will be displayed. Okay, you have to copy that password, guys. Access your REST API. Access your REST controller method. Access your REST controller method using browser. It will ask your username and password. Username I am giving as user. Username I am giving as user. Password printed on the console. take the password from console. Take the password from console and enter it. Take the password from the console. Okay. If you give valid credentials, then your request will be authenticated. Then you will get the response from the REST controller. Otherwise, it will display invalid credentials. If given credentials are valid, your request will be authenticated and you can access REST API method. Otherwise, your request will be denied. Note that authentication logic added by Spring Security Starter by default. Note, we have not implemented any logic for this, any logic for security. We just added security security starter. It is providing authentication functionality by default. Are you guys clear with this? What is happening with this jar file? Now see here, Spring Security is one module available in Spring Framework. Spring Security is one module available in Spring Framework. Using Spring Security, we can secure our applications. When we are talking about security, first we need to talk about authentication and authorization. Authentication is the process of verifying whether user can access our application or not, like login checking. Authorization is the process of checking whether this user can access the required functionality or not. Okay. Now, if you go for Spring Framework security, it will provide you authentication and authorization support. Sir, how can I use Spring Security in my project? You just add the dependency in the pom.xml. To use Spring Security, we have Spring Security Starter. How to add the Spring Security to our project? Create one boot application with the below dependency. This is the new dependency we have added first time. Spring Boot Starter Security. Apart from the dependency adding, I have not done anything, guys. Then create the REST controller with required methods. Configure embedded server port number in the properties file. Run the application and observe console. Auto-generated password will be displayed. Access your REST controller method using browser. It is asking your username and password. Okay, let me stop my project and let me start it again. Right click, run as boot app. Again password generated or not? Again the password generated or not? Again password is generated. Let's copy this password. Go to browser, send a request. From this browser, the request is already passed. That's why it is not asking me to log in once again. Okay, let me go to different browser, guys. Microsoft Edge browser I am opening. I'm going for different browser because in this browser already my session is created, JSession IDs are stored. That's why it is not asking me to log in once again. Now go to another browser, /welcome. Try to access it. Try to access this. Is it asking me to sign in or not? Username I am giving as ABC. Password, let me copy from the console. Let me give the password. This is the password which is generated, guys. Click on sign in. What it is saying that? Bad credentials. Give the username as user. Give the copied password. Click on sign in. Now we are getting. So what should be the username? User. What should be the username, guys? User. What should be the password? which is generated on the console. Which is generated on the console. Okay? Username and password generated on the console. Hey, here, username and password, I am deciding for my application or Spring Security deciding for my application? Come on guys. Username, password we are deciding or Spring is deciding for our application? Spring is deciding for our application. Do you like that? Do you like that? It is your project, na? You should decide the security for your project. You should decide the credentials for your project. Who is that Spring Hell? Who is the Spring Security to decide my credentials? I will decide my credentials. I will configure some username and password for my application. Are you able to follow me? Currently, we have added Spring Boot Starter security dependency for our project. Then by default, our application got secured by Spring Security. It is using one login form to authenticate our application requests. It is asking username and password. Username should be user. Password it is generating and printing on the console. So here, for our application, Spring Security deciding the credentials. What should be the username, what should be the password, that is deciding by Spring Security. And who is that Spring to decide my application credentials? Who is that Spring Security to decide my application credentials? I will decide the credentials for my application. Okay. How can you configure the credentials for your application? Go to application or properties file, spring.security.name. I will give the name as admin. spring.security.user.password admin @123. So, am I configuring username and password for my API? Am I configuring username and password for my API? User.name is admin. User.password is equal to admin @123. That is fine. Okay, let's close all the unrelated projects. Okay, now let's go here. Right click, run as boot app. Run this application. Run this application. Now, can you see password is generated? Is it printing the random password on the console? Is it printing the random password on the console? Why? Why it is not printing the password on the console? Boys, come on. Boys and girls, why it is not printing? If you don't configure the username and password, then it will go for the default. But here, I am configuring my username and password for authentication of my application. Now, I closed and opened my browser again. Let's try to access it. localhost:9090/welcome. Send a request. Is it asking me to sign in? Can I give some random value? Sign in. Bad credentials. Where are my credentials available? My credentials available in the properties file. What is the username? Admin. Password? Admin @123. So let me give admin. Correct credentials. Admin @123. Click on sign in. Yes, it is success. Now we are able to configure the username and password to authenticate the request. If any user send a request with that username and password, then it is successful. Then it is successful. Are you guys able to follow this? Now the question is, you are accessing from the browser, it is working. It is working. How can you access from the postman? How can you access from the postman? Can we try to access from the postman? Now, I have developed a REST API. My REST API is secured or my REST API is not secured? My REST API is secured with the username and password. I have configured security starter In the properties file I have given username and password, then my application is secured. My application is having authentication logic. Spring Security provided authentication logic for my application. Spring Security provided authentication logic for my application. Okay, now go to Postman. Chalo, let's try to access our API from the Postman and see what our API will tell. Localhost :9090/welcome. Send the request. 401 unauthorized. Boss, you cannot access. What it is saying that? You are not authorized to access. Is it asking to enter the username and password? Is it asking to enter the username and password, or it is not asking? It is not asking. But if I send the request from the browser, it is asking me to enter the username and password. Now, how can I send the username and password to the REST API from the Postman? How can I send the request to the REST API from the Postman? Come on, guys. My REST API is having a authentication logic. How can I send the request to that REST API? How can I send the request to the REST API which is having authentication? Come on. Any idea? Any guess? How can I send the request to the REST API? Now, you see here, there is a concept called authorization. Go for basic auth. What is this? Basic auth. Admin. Show the password admin@123. Update the request. Now here there is a header called authorization header, basic, encoded username and password, and click on send. Now am I able to access? If your REST API is secured, then when you are accessing from the Postman, you need to set basic authentication. Username is admin, password is admin@123. Now when you click on update request, that username password added to HTTP header. That username is added to HTTP header. What is the name of the header? Authorization is the name of the header. What is the header value? Basic space encoded username and password. This is encoded username and password. Basic space encoded username and password, which is having authorization as a header. Now, guys, see the beauty of the Spring Security here. If I send a request from the browser, it is displaying a login page. Am I right? Let's close this. Let's go to Edge browser. If I send a request to this URL from the browser, it is displaying what? Come on. If I send a request to this URL from the browser, it is displaying what? Login page will come. This page is not responding. Wait. Login page is coming. When I send a request from the Postman, is it giving me the login page or it is not giving me the login page? Come on. See the difference. When I'm sending a request from the browser, it is displaying me login page. It is asking me to enter my username and password. It is asking me to enter my username and password when I give the request from the browser. But same URL, if I access from the Postman, is it displaying a login page or it is displaying the 401 unauthorized? When I access from the browser, it is displaying me the login page. When I'm accessing the same URL from the postman, it is giving me 401 unauthorized. Now tell me, in my project, do I have any such kind of logic to display login page if the request comes from the browser, display unauthorized if the request comes from the postman, verify given username and password valid or not? If the request is coming with the HTTP header called authorization, check it, username, password correct or not. Do I have that logic in my project, or that logic is not available in my project? Do I have that logic in my project, or I don't have that logic in my project? I don't have it. Where is that logic available? Where is that logic available? Come on, guys. In the Spring Security, that logic is available. Spring Security having that logic, guys. Spring Security having that logic. Now, whenever you send a request from the browser, it is displaying a login page. Whenever you send a request from the postman, it is giving 401. Okay? If I am sending authorization header with the key and value, then it is processing that request. If I am sending a authorization header with the basic space encoded username and password, then it is processing that request. This is called basic authentication. What kind of authentication is available for our application, guys? Now, how my application is secured? My application is secured with the basic auth. My application is secured with the basic auth. Okay. To access, if you access this application from postman, if you want to access this application from postman, then we have to set authorization header. We have to set authorization header. How that authorization header will look like? Authorization is equal to basic space encoded username colon password. This is the format to send username and password to the REST API by using authorization header. If you want to access this REST API from your program, I have developed one REST API. If you want to access my REST API, then definitely you have to send one header like this. Authorization is equal to basic encoded username colon password. If you send this header in the request, then only you can access my REST API. This is called basic auth to secure the REST APIs. This is the basic auth which is used to secure our REST APIs. Are you guys able to understand what is the basic auth? Are you guys able to understand what is the basic auth now? How to access the REST APIs which are having basic auth? By sending authorization header in the request. What should be the value of this header? Authorization is equal to basic space encoded username colon password. Basic encoded of username colon password. Basic of username encoded username colon password. Authorization is equal to basic encoded username colon password. Are you guys clear with this? I'm showing once again how to access this from the postman. Go to postman. Let me delete it completely. Delete it completely. Delete it completely. Okay. Delete this. Nothing is there. Clear this. Nothing is there. Nothing is there. Okay. I want to access my REST API, guys. Get request 9090/welcome. What is happening here? 401 unauthorized. Am I able to access my REST API or am I unable to access my REST API? Come on, guys. I'm unable to access. But the same URL, if I access from the Chrome browser, is it asking me to enter the username password? It is processing my request. Guys, a lot of things are executing internally here. If I am accessing from this postman, it is unauthorized. If I am accessing from Edge browser, login page. If I am accessing from the Chrome browser, response is coming. Wow, 3 different behaviors for my REST API. Can I say my REST API is a polymorphic behavior now? Can I say my REST API is having a polymorphic behavior? See this. I'm not joking, guys. I'm not joking. See this. If I access it from the Chrome browser, I'm getting the response. Copy this URL, go to Edge browser, access it. Login page coming. Go to postman, access this URL. It is giving 401 unauthorized. So when I send 3 requests, for the 3 requests, response is same. Response is different for each request. Response is same for the 3 requests, or response is different for the 3 requests? Different. So can I say that Spring Security module is matured and intelligent? When to do what? Come on. Guys, here in the REST API, we discussed one concept. Communication stateless. Every request should be treated as a first request only. There is no concept of the sessions in the REST API. User information should not be stored in the application. Every request should be treated as first request only. Every request should be treated as first request only. Now, go to Edge browser, enter the username and password, admin@123. See this, I'm giving username as admin, password as admin@123. Click on sign in. Am I able to get the response? I got the response from this Edge browser. Copy this URL, go to another tab, access this URL once again, same URL. Is it asking me to sign in once again, or I'm getting the response from the Edge browser now? How many times you send the request, you will get the response. Only first time it is asking to enter the username and password. That means once you log in successfully from the browser, it is sending you some JSession ID that is storing in the browser cookies. JSession ID stored in the browser cookie. When I send the request again, that session ID is sent to the server. It is validated. That's why it is giving the response. Session ID is available in the browser. Now, let me close the browser. Let me open the same browser once again. I have closed it. I'm opening the browser. After browser got opened, access the same URL. Are you getting the response, or it is asking to sign in? Are you getting the response, or it is asking to sign in? Bhaiya, come on. Am I able to access it, or it is asking me to sign in? It is sign in. So what is the conclusion? In the browser, cookies are stored or not? Once you log in successfully, that cookie will be stored in the browser. When you send the second request, that cookie will be sent to the server. Server will recognize this and it is processing that request. But from the postman, here I want to access it. Okay, username, password I have to send. How to send it? Go to authorization header, select the authorization type as a basic auth, enter the username, that is admin, enter the username as admin, enter the password as admin@123. Once you have given the username and password, there is a button called update request. Click on update request. When you click on the update request, here one header will be added, guys. Currently, do you have any header? No. I have selected the authorization type as a basic auth. I have given the username as admin. I have given the password as admin@123. Click on update request. I have clicked on update request. Now header is added. What is there in this header? Authorization is the key. Value contains basic space. Some characters are there. What are these characters?